Subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon so that you know when live we go. Before we begin, I must inform you that we shall be releasing the answer key of UPSC Prelims Examination 2020 along with the DNS on 4th October 2020. Also, since today is Thursday, we have uploaded another question in our series of mains question assignment from DNS. The question for today's assignment is this. Highlight the circumstances in which a state can impose reasonable restriction on freedom of speech and expressions. What are the ways in which citizens can seek protection against reasonable restrictions imposed by a state, which also include charging citizens under any preventive detention law? This question has been created from the DNS of 9 September 2020 from the discussion titled The Demonization of Dissent. If you're not comfortable answering this question, you might like to listen to the discussion first. There are a few big little things that you must keep in mind while posting your answer on the ELEARN platform. You can type the answer in the comment box or you can click the image and then send your answer to us. It is preferable that you write on the piece of paper, click the image in the portrait format and then upload it here, because writing on paper is what you will be doing in the actual exam. All those who will send their answers by Saturday will get the evaluation and feedback from RAU'S IAS teachers. It's very important that you post your answer in the portrait mode only. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult to evaluate the answer twisting and turning the neck. So you will be held responsible if the evaluators develop cervical problem over the period of time. You should not post your answer as a comment to someone else's answer. Use the main comment box at the bottom of the thread to submit your answer. Otherwise, your answer may not get evaluated. It's very important that you keep a tab on the time taken. Mains examination is all about speed. So you must keep a track of the time. It would be a good habit to mention the time taken by you to write the answer at the top of your answer sheet. You can also mention the city and the state from where you are posting your answer. This will help us to know that students are benefiting across India and DNS is reaching every nook and corner of the country. In the description of the video, there is a link for question assignment where you can participate in the discussion on RAU'S IAS eLearn platform. In the description, you'll also find the link to the question which has been uploaded today as mains weekly question. In the next 30 minutes, I am going to take you through today's newspaper, The Hindu, Delhi edition, and we shall discuss the articles which are important from the civil service examination perspective. The articles that we shall take up for discussion has been tabulated on your screen and the time stamping for the same has been given in the description section. This is the lead article from page number 6. It has been titled Time to Shift Focus to the Maritime Sphere. The author of the article is of the opinion that India has almost exclusively focused on the continental space in the geopolitical strategy. And in the pursuance of the continental strategy, India has almost reached a dead end. The author of the article strongly holds the opinion that India has been traditionally obsessed with continental approach to war and peace. For example, long back there was an initiative of Tapi pipeline, the pipeline that was to come from Turkmenistan via Afghanistan, Pakistan to India. Then India identified Iran as the gateway to Central Asia and Afghanistan. India has spent heavily in the Chabahar port project and in the onward rail connectivity to Afghanistan. Iran is also seen as a doorway to Central Asia, and India's Connect Central Asia policy is hinged on Iran. Similarly, with regard to Southeast Asian country, India has been constructing India-Myanmar-Thailand trilateral highway. This will increase India's approach towards ASEAN countries as well. But this is to not say that India has not attempted any maritime strategy. India has constructed multimodal Kaladan project. India is in the process of constructing Sabang port in Indonesia. India already has constructed Chabahar port in Iran. India has got contract for maritime projects in many Indian Ocean littoral countries like Sri Lanka, like Maldives. But it is also a fact that India do not have very strong base in Indian Ocean region like China has. And India's most important maritime project till date, Project Mawsum, is a non-starter. So the concern of the author is that India does not have a very strong planning for the maritime sphere, and India's continental grand strategy is facing an existential crisis. The most important reason for the failing continental space is lack of reconciliation with adversaries, mostly China and to some extent Pakistan. The legitimate territorial claim that India has in Aksai Chin in Pakistan occupied Kashmir, that seems to be impossible to be pursued any further. So New Delhi's continental option seems to be very restricted. And further, the author is of the opinion that it may become very difficult to stop further territorial loss. Despite spending most of the geopolitical energy in the continental strategy, India has gained very little. According to the author, despite spending most of the geopolitical energy in the continental strategy, India has gained very little. For instance, author says that China has begun to push the boundaries with India, and China is neither keen on ending the ongoing border crisis nor reinstating the status quo that India is demanding, the status of the border that was prevailing in March 2020. So it is not just the question of maintaining the status quo. China is pushing it even further than that. China is now pushing India's claim on Aksai Chin as well. The northeastern region of LAC was considered peaceful for a long time, but now skirmishes and stalemate has started to take place in this region as well. China has really crossed the red line on LAC, and this will have everlasting impact on India-China relationship. India is buckling up for a bitter winter in the Himalayan border, and things will not ease out anytime soon. The problem is not only with China. Even in the northwest, Pakistan front is now started to heat up. Ceasefire violations on the LOC has spiked since last year, and infiltration of terrorists across LAC has also increased. Pakistan also has started to show a hardened stand, and that perhaps because of collusion with China, because otherwise Pakistan will not have cheek to show entire Jammu and Kashmir in its political map. Although the jugalbandi between China and Pakistan is not uncommon, but the intensity of China-Pakistan containment strategy against India is unprecedented. India has developed very closely crafted strategy in Afghanistan. India has invested in terms of development of physical infrastructure and also soft power in Afghanistan. India has been playing a fine craft in Afghanistan for a long time. But now when the US is planning to pull out of Afghanistan, and when the NATO force will go away and the power will return in the hands of Taliban, India once again stand to lose. Because India had very little contact with Taliban. India did not want to engage with Taliban because Taliban was not a legitimate government in Afghanistan. But now when power is given in the hands of Taliban and Taliban will be ruling a better half of Afghanistan, geopolitical tide may go against New Delhi as the situation was in 1990s when Taliban had a very strong hold on Afghanistan. Also with the exit of US, interest of Pakistan, China and Russia will merge. And these power may ensure that India is kept out of the affairs of Afghanistan. There is a friction in India-Iran relationship. Iran has got into a 25-year agreement with China. Iran will provide oil and gas to China, and China will do investment in Iran. India failed to stand by Iran during the time of its difficulty. And that has caused some friction to grow in the relationship between Iran and India. Iran never used to interfere in the internal matters of India, but recently Iran has been giving statements on Jammu and Kashmir. This is not a good sign. And with change in geopolitical landscapes in Afghanistan and decreased cooperation with Iran, India's interest in Central Asia will also be hurt. Because India's Connect Central Asia policy is dependent on Iran. So with these events, author is eyeing on a failure of India's continental strategy. And that is why author is calling for a maritime strategy. The author gives out many reasons as to why the grand maritime strategy will work very well in India's advantage, even when India is struggling with continental dilemma. Author says that unlike the continental sphere, Where India seems to be sandwiched between China and Pakistan, the maritime sphere is wide open to India to undertake any kind of collision building, to get involved in rule setting in the maritime sphere, and to do other form of strategic exploration, for example, mineral exploration in Indian Ocean. India is well placed to do all these because India is right at the center of Indo-Pacific. But perhaps the most important reason for India to adopt a but perhaps the most important reason for India to adopt a maritime strategy is that, unlike continental sphere, there is a growing interest among the great powers in the maritime sphere. Almost all the great powers have their own strategy for the Indo-Pacific. For example, recently Germany has given out its own set of rules to be applicable to Indo-Pacific. Prior to that, France have given a holistic strategy for Indo-Pacific. Even nations like South Korea have their own strategy for Indo-Pacific. Japan has it, Australia has it, not to mention US and UK. The European or American interest in India's land border with China and Pakistan is negligible. And there would be very little that these countries can do to help India in its continental confrontation, mostly with China. But the situation in the maritime sphere is exact opposite because great powers remain ever more interested in the maritime sphere. They have interest in the trade route, they have interest in the strategic points like the Malacca Strait, like the Persian Gulf, like the South China Sea. Talking of South China Sea, the Beijing's bullying behavior in the sea in particular and in general in the region has generated a great deal of willingness among the European and American powers, including Australia and Japan, to push back Chinese unilateralism. And this provides New Delhi with some opportunity to create a good strategic alliance and checkmate the Chinese ambition in the region. The stake for China in the maritime region is much higher than the opportunistic land grab in the Himalayas, because massive Chinese trade happens via oceanic routes, and a complex geopolitics around the maritime checkpoints can potentially disrupt these trade of China. So if India develops a very strong maritime strategy, that will give India some maneuvering room to checkmate the adventurism of China happening in the Himalayas. So it's important for India to shift from almost exclusive focus from the continental space to the maritime space. How India can do it? One important step India has already taken, and that is Ministry of External Affairs Indo-Pacific Division. This has been launched in November 2019. It's an important step towards focusing on the maritime strategy. Last year, an important decision was also taken to elevate the Quad meeting among India, Japan, United States and Australia to the ministerial level. This will increase the weightage and enhance the cooperation in the Quad. The author is calling for considering appointing a special envoy for Indo-Pacific affairs, which India till date do not have. India has started to give Indo-Pacific Division briefs document, but this does not seem to be adequate. So India must increase its diplomatic machinery for Indo-Pacific affairs and increase engagement with other countries through groupings like Quad. And in the next article, we shall deal with Quad in detail. Now let's talk about this lead article from page number 6, written by Mr. Vijay Gokhale, the former ambassador of India to China, on Quad grouping. The second ministerial meeting of the 4 countries under the Quad will be held in Japan. As we have discussed in the previous article, the meetings of the Quad is now taken at ministerial level. Let me first give you some basic of Quad grouping as to how it started and how it stands today. Quad, which is formally called as Quadrilateral Security Group, was formed originally out of the crisis that followed tsunami in December 2004. It was formed for the purpose of rescue operation, and India's rescue operation in Indian Ocean was coordinated by 3 other naval powers, US, Australia and Japan. And during the course of this coordinated operation, the idea of Indo-Pacific as a larger maritime strategic community was borne out. In 2007, Japan, Australia and Singapore joint military exercise with India and US, and this formally started the Quad Grouping 1.0. The idea was initially conceptualized by Mr. Shinzo Abe, the former Prime Minister of Japan, and he termed this strategic coordination the confluence of two seas, referring to Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean. However, even before the idea could materialize and a vision can develop, China started to get rattled. And to some lesser degree, Russia too. They termed it an attempt to build an Asian NATO. And the pressure tactic of China worked very well in its favor. Because at that point of time, US was trying to gain China's support for two reasons basically. One, US wanted North Korea to come on table for dialogue. And for this, US needed support of China. And two, US wanted China's support to fight terrorism as well and to contain Iran. And to gain China's support, US pulled out of the military exercise in 2008. Additionally, during this time, the global financial crisis of 2008 was looming large over the economy of US. So US was not in the mood to get into confrontation with China, whose economy US needed at that point in time. And so did Japan and Australia. Both were riding the China's boom to prosperity. And because of the ambivalent nature of these three economies, US, Japan and Australia, India too was ambivalent, meaning India was not sure what to do. Perhaps on the insistence of US, Australia pulled out of the military exercise. So Australia was not part of Malabar exercise anymore. And as such, the idea of Quad was put in the cold storage. So the idea started and fell flat pretty soon. And then over the period of 10 years, China will have free hand to adopt expansive maritime policy, and only in 2017 these great powers will again realize that the time has come for revival of Quad, and Quad will be revived in the form of Quad 2.0. And soon after the Doklam standoff between India and China, the officials from these four countries met and gave a kickstart for Quad dialogue. The author has given an insight as to why in 2007-8 China and to some lesser degree Russia gave hyper reaction to the formation of Quad. It is very intriguing because joint understanding was not developed yet. Any joint vision for Indo-Pacific was not put out by the Quad grouping. But still China labeled Quad as an Asian version of NATO. Now in the hindsight, it is clear and author has highlighted the reason for that hyper reaction. If Quad grouping would have formed, then Indo-Pacific would have become the center for coordination among these four countries. And that would have created trouble for China's plan for naval expansion in the Indo-Pacific maritime space. China was hoping that its naval buildup might not be noticed, would slip from the radar, because Americans and other powers would be distracted by the continental challenges, including that by Russia in the Crimean Peninsula, in Afghanistan, and also engagement with Iran. Getting embroiled in these continental challenges, they will not look seaward. So once Quad 1 died out in 2008, China gained confidence and showed its true color. The first expansive maritime stance taken by China was proclamation of 9-dash line in the South China Sea, claiming that all the islands under the 9-dash line belongs to China. It undertook rapid warship building activity, the kind that was shown by Germany before 1914. China built its first overseas base in Djibouti. China systematically started to explore surface and subsurface environment in the Indian Ocean beyond the Malacca Strait. It was exactly these kind of activities that China wanted to do without attracting the attention of the great powers. And that is why it wanted to stall the formation of Quad grouping at any cost. Then the straw that broke the camel's back was the International Arbitral Award given in the favor of Philippines regarding the island dispute between Philippines and China. China simply brushed off the judgment. China refused to accept it. And worse, China started brazen militarization of the island. And this happened after the president of Philippines did a U-turn. Philippines gave up the claim on the island and willingly gave it to China. With this incident in 2017, the Quad countries got alarmed of increasing grip and advancement and aggression of China in the maritime space in the region. And that gave rise to Quad 2.0. The author has some suggestion. The suggestion is regarding the success of Quad 2.0. The author has identified that what can go wrong. The author says that Chinese are skilled at obfuscation. Obfuscate means to make things hazy, to hide the reality, to unnecessarily convolute things, to unnecessarily make it complicated. China may link the formation of Quad with China containment theory. China may raise fear among the littoral countries in Indian Ocean that this is going to be a military organization, creating more tension in the region. So the Quad nation needs to better explain the formation of Quad, give their Indo-Pacific vision, and discuss everything in a transparent manner, showing that its objective is advancing everyone's economic and security interest. The Quad countries must also highlight that this is a very general kind of grouping and other groupings like this already exist. For example, in 2016, China itself established a quadrilateral cooperation and coordination mechanism with Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Tajikistan. More recently, another quadrilateral group has been formed by China with Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Nepal. China has roped in Nepal as well in its Silk Route project. So the quadrilateral security group involving India, US, Japan, and Australia will not be any exception. The author is also very positive that this time the idea will not be shelved like Quad 1.0. In 2007, perhaps Quad was an idea whose time had not come yet. But time has changed over the period of 1 decade, and today's world is very different. The four countries are navigating through turbulent waters and they have a strained relation with China. The global pandemic and the weakening global economy are taking a toll on the region's growth and prosperity. And two of the major Pacific powers, China and US, are moving into more adversarial phase of their relationship. So this time, US will not back out like the last time. Public opinion on China has changed. Previously, China was not seen as an aggressive power or a rogue nation like Russia had its image in the West. But this image of China has changed, especially during the time of COVID-19. China is now viewed as an irresponsible nation that, if wanted, could have stopped the global pandemic, could have alerted the world on time, but it chose to not do that. Aggression of China along LAC is well known. Aggression of China in South China Sea has been observed by the world for a long time now. And cumulatively, anger against China has increased a lot. But for the success of Quad, it's important that it adopts a multilateral strategy, allaying the fear of the littoral states that this is not a close grouping, rather it aims at prosperity and security of all. Recently, the Deputy Secretary of State of US has suggested that other countries can be also invited to join Quad in future. This is a welcome approach because India has many partners in the Indo-Pacific region, and involvement of those nations will ensure the success of this grouping. And of course, the group must continue with the idea with which it started, the humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, monitoring shipping for search and rescue or anti-piracy operations, even infrastructure assistance to climatically vulnerable states. Taking some connectivity initiatives will also help in reassuring the littoral states that Quad will be a factor for regional benefit, contrary to the Chinese allegation that it is some sort of military alliance. The former Prime Minister of China, Mr. Shinzo Abe, who recently stepped down from the Prime Ministership, said in the Central Hall of Parliament of India in 2007 that a broader Asia that broke away from geographical boundaries is now beginning to take on a distinct form. The vision with which Mr. Shinzo Abe conceptualized Quad, time has come that his dream be realized now. Now let's do this article from page number 14. Government retains rupees 12 lakh crore borrowing plan. See, the thing is, during the course of 5 months of this fiscal year, fiscal deficit already touched around 8.7 lakh crore. This is 109% of 7.8 lakh crore that was initially decided in the budget of 2021. 7.8 lakh crore is around 3.5% of GDP. So in the budget of 2020-21, initially it was decided to keep the fiscal deficit at 3.5%. But after budget, when the pandemic of COVID-19 took grip in India, this 7.8 lakh crore was revised to rupees 12 lakh crore. It was increased by about 50%. But 8.7 lakh crore already has been touched in 5 months down this fiscal year. When the fiscal year would be completed, it will be reasonable to think that this rupees 12 lakh crore will also be breached. But government has decided to retain this borrowing plan of rupees 12 lakh crore. Because this 12 lakh crore already comes to about 5.6% of GDP. And government is in no mood to further increase the fiscal deficit. See, for fiscal management and budget discipline, Fiscal Responsibility and Budgetary Management Act 2003 was enacted. Under this act, government has been mandated to keep the fiscal deficit at 3% of GDP. At 3% of GDP by end of 31st March 2021. But at the same time, the government of India was given freedom to exceed fiscal deficit target by 0.5% on account of certain factors. And these factors are national security, war, collapse of agriculture, structural reforms, and decline in the GDP growth of a quarter by 3%. And in the budget of 2021, Finance Minister decided to invoke this escape clause under the FRBM Act and keep the fiscal deficit target for the financial year 2021 to 3.5%. This is the maximum allowed by the FRBM Act. But forcefully, the Government of India had to revise the borrowing target in the wake of COVID-19 to rupees 12 lakh crore, which comes to about 5.6% of GDP. Hence, it is not sure as to whether the Government of India will be able to meet the fiscal deficit target of 3.5% in the current fiscal year, because it had to be met by 31st of March 2021. In the most conservative calculation will be going to 5.6%. It can even shoot more than this. Now the question is, since we have already overshooted this maximum allowed limit of 3.5%, should we not increase it a little more if the demand of the economy is such? You know that in the current financial year, because of the COVID-19, because of lockdown, because of prevailing depression kind of situation in the economy, there has been decline in the tax revenue, and at the same time government expenditure has exorbitantly increased in terms of providing fiscal stimulus. However, it has been pointed out by many economists that government should not unduly be worried about the fiscal deficit, because this fiscal deficit is not because of increased expenditure by government, rather it is on account of decreased revenue. So this is not the case of bad fiscal discipline. And government must focus on providing fiscal stimulus measures by undertaking higher expenditure for the creation of new assets. Because such expenditure will have the potential to increase more employment opportunity in our economy, and cumulatively that will help to kickstart our economy and increase the GDP growth in the coming fiscal year. So this is a general opinion among the economists that government might not have revised this rupees 12 lakh crore borrowing plan, but in the coming time, Government of India might have to do that. Now let's do question for the day. Yesterday's question was this. Consider the following countries: Lebanon, Algeria, Georgia, Syria and Tunisia. Which of the above border Mediterranean Sea? Except for Georgia, Lebanon, Algeria, Syria and Tunisia opens to the Mediterranean Sea. Opens to the Mediterranean Sea. So the answer would be option D, 1, 2, 4 and 5 only. Today's question is this. Consider the following events: formation of Quad 2.0, global financial meltdown of 2008, Doklam crisis, development of China's base at Djibouti. Arrange the above in chronological order and select the correct option. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 4, 3, 1, 1, 2, 4, 3 or 2, 1, 3, 4. With this, we have come to the end of the discussion. I hope we learned something in the 30 minutes that we spent together. Do not forget to attempt the DNS quiz on the ELEARN platform.